Congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much.
To start with, I wondered if you could give me just a little bit of an insight into your own kind of introduction to horror as you were growing up in rural Maine.
Yeah, I mean, I came to horror in the same way that a lot of people did, like, going to the video store and sort of, you know, flipping through the VHS tapes and sort of seeing what was available and sort of accepting what was there. It wasn't like I had a huge selection. I was sort of voracious and would watch anything and everything. Which led to seeing lots of really bad movies and then some more interesting. Um, pre-internet and pre sort of access that we have now to anything and everything.
Yes, and we're maybe around the same age. I don't know, but we're watching some of the same films in those years. And when it came to queerness, it was subtext at best, or just like not there.
Yeah.
Or we were kind of jokes, or maybe occasionally the villains.
Yeah.
But what was, so I guess like how meaningful is it maybe for you to bring queerness to, front and center with your films with Swallowed, which is just,
I mean, to me, that's like, the most exciting thing of all is that to see yourself in the films that you love so much is, it's important and it's powerful. And it's, you sort of forget that how important that is. I mean, I think that as queer people, we make do and we sort of survive in a way. We sort of find, we pull subtext from where we can, and we sort of see things that only we can see. And so for me to put it front and center and make a film that is 100% sort of unabashedly from a queer point of view, with queer characters in a story that isn't necessarily about them being queer. Like, I like that that was one of the things that was really important to me, was that it's a human story, but it's not the queer story that we've seen about the angst of sort of dealing with that queerness. It's like Benjamin is a character that is 100% comfortable and confident in who he is, and in the same way that Mark Patton's character, like, that's those guys are they're queer and they're not apologizing for it, which is really interesting, especially in a horror film.
Yes, and people that have seen Scream Queen, about kind of Mark Patton's experience on A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 will know that we'll know something about that. If people haven't seen that, they should go and watch that. But
yeah,
I just wonder, it felt to me almost like a sort of it was sort of a reclaiming of what happened to him in that, in giving Mark this quite camp and explicitly gay character for him just to have a great time in, and he's also very creepy in it. And so how intentional was that, and did you write it for him specifically?
Yeah, 100% I wrote it for him. I saw Scream Queen just like everybody else and kind of became fascinated and fell in love with, like, Mark Patton the person, from that doc. And so from the beginning I wrote Rich with him in mind. And I think that Rich is the sort of guy that a lot of us as sort of young queer people, we sort of run into. I mean, there's a predatory vibe, and there's there's sort of this this element to it that I think is it's not unique to the queer experience, but it is a very specific take on what that power dynamic is. But I just also wanted to see him be rich, and like and rich on the page probably wasn't as big maybe as the version was, but like I'm so happy that he felt that he could go there, and that we were able to keep so much of it in the film, because I love the Rich that Mark brought to the movie.
Yes, yeah, no, me too. It was a great seeing him in it. And give me a bit of an insight into the inspiration behind the screenplay for this. I know that Jose Colon did a photo shoot with you for your All the Dead Boys series, so that he was kind of your muse in a way. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the starting point. That was the beginning of the whole thing. I mean, I spent one afternoon photographing him, and then sort of went off, and I went back to Maine, and I started writing, and this character named Dom kind of appeared, and sort of I followed where that character took me. And I sort of, you know, I was like, okay, well, he has a best friend who's in love with him, who's moving to LA. Like it was the starting point. And you know, from the beginning, it was sort of crafted to be a project that we could go out and make with a tiny little crew on a micro budget. And so it was always meant to be this sort of like, you know, um, a film that we didn't need to wait for permission or for, you know, for sort of, you know, a lot of the you know, the stuff that you face in developing films is it takes a long time, and you're always waiting for this one piece of casting to fall into place or one piece of financing. And I just wanted to do something that I could, you know, gather a bunch of friends and we could go make a movie, which is a way of filmmaking that I hadn't done before, and I was really excited to explore.
And it's Jose's screen debut as an actor, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Very natural in it, and he's obviously alongside Mark Patton, who's very experienced, and Jen Malone, and Cooper, that's done a lot of work recently as well. So
that was it was great to watch them together, like, you know, and to sort of see him and the different styles of acting and how, you know, how they worked together was really exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me a little bit about Cooper, casting him as Benjamin, what you wanted from that character, what he brought to it.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper is the only person that he put himself on tape for me, because we weren't in the same place, and I had met him before, and just the second that I saw the tape, I was like, "That's Benjamin." He has all of the, you know, gay porn potential, and he has all of like the strength and the vulnerability and the, you know, everything that I wanted from Benjamin was like on Cooper's face, and I sort of knew that a lot of the film was going to play out in these, you know, sort of close-ups, and just that you know, all of them have faces that the camera loves. You know, so it was, you know, he was a dream, you know, Benjamin. He was kind of the only choice after I saw that tape.
Yeah, and you mentioned the gay porn potential, so we should say for people that haven't seen the film yet that the character is he's a sort of burgeoning gay porn star. He's about to move to LA to take on that career.
Yeah, the film takes place on the last night. They have two best friends, and you know, who have grown up together in small town Maine, and Benjamin is about to move to LA to pursue his career in gay porn.
Yeah, and it's quite sex positive, isn't it? You know, you know, he's not ashamed of it. Dom's kind of proud of him that he's going to do it. Why did you make that choice, that, you know, that was going to be the job that he was going to go off to LA to do?
I mean, I just like the idea that he was a character that was like, he wasn't the struggling, angsty gay character that is, you know, has problems with, you know, their identity. I liked the fact that he came from a place of being comfortable with who he is and proud of it, and sort of, you know, willing to embrace it and you know, use what he has, you know, to his advantage. I think that's a really interesting take that you don't often see. And I also knew that, like, though, you know, those skills were going to come in helpful later when he's dealing with the rich character.
Mm-hmm. And well, we can't miss out Jenna Malone as we're talking about the cast. So you'd worked with her before on The Ruins as well. So why did you want to bring her into this family, quite intimate family?
Well, because she's amazing, first of all. You know, we had done the Ruins together, and we'd always stayed in touch and stayed friends and talked about finding something else to do together. And, you know, just for whatever reason, like nothing, you know, happened. And so when I started writing this, I very much in the back of my mind, you know, imagined her as Alice. And, you know, when you're making a movie like this with such a small crew and such a sort of lean, mean model of production, you really want to make sure that everyone you surround yourself with is as game for the process as you are. And, you know, and that was super important because, you know, it wasn't an easy shoot, and you really do become a family when the crew is 8 people and the cast is 4 people. Like you know, you bond in a way that you don't necessarily on a bigger set.
And what's the draw for you of body horror specifically, and how would you kind of describe your approach to it with Swallowed? Because I think you do some really interesting things with it.
I mean, I've always been fascinated by body horror, and I think that part of that comes from growing up as a gay kid in the age of HIV and sort of equating sex with death in a lot of ways. Like I think that bodies and sex like were terrifying when I was a kid, or when I was a teenager, because every mark, was kind of like I was always sort of waiting for my body to betray me in a way that felt really scary. And I think that, obviously that's a while ago, and now it's like, thinking about like body horror in the context of like, losing control and the aging process, and disease and sickness. Like there's so many ways that we don't have control of our bodies, and that's in a lot of ways the scariest thing. I find that much more frightening than like a masked killer, or an alien from space or something like that. I think that there's something about our loss of control that is, both fascinating and horrifying. And so I wanted to, with Swallowed, I wanted to explore some of that stuff, and from a perspective of, someone like Benjamin, who is comfortable with himself, but ends up in a horrific situation nonetheless.
Yeah, it's almost like the call's coming from inside the house, and the house is actually your body in some way, with bugs.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And male nudity is actually something that's still pretty rare on film. We're starting to see quite a bit more of it, I think, on television, and particularly
on television, which is
HBO
so
shows.
Weird to me. Yeah.
But what was it? So it's always very intentional when I think when we do see male nudity in films, just because it's so rare. And here it felt like at times we were sort of being implicated in being voyeurs, and it's not gratuitous. Obviously, in the past, the sort of movies we were talking about that we found on VHS, there were a lot of little glimpses of young naked
if you could
women in the
frame
showers.
just right, you could see an ass. Like, yeah.
Or that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, there was some jock straps and things where they're going on. But yeah, what was your approach to the nudity in Swallowed?
I mean, I wanted to, in a lot of ways, make the movie that I wish that I'd had and been able to find at my video store as a 16-year-old kid, with all the nudity that I was so, sort of anxious to see, and just wasn't seeing in the film, there in the horror films that I was loving. And on the page, I made it very clear that like this is nude, like naked, nude, and with the hope that I would then sort of scare away the actors that weren't on board for that. In the original script, Benjamin, like, he never puts his pants back on, and he spends the last like 40 minutes of the movie naked from the waist down. Like, and that was intentionally so that an actor would see that and say, oh God, like that's going to be intense. I mean, of course, the reality of shooting in the woods with the bugs and the sticks and I was like, okay, well, we'll give him some underwear at some point. But like, I wanted to, put the male body front and center in a way that it often isn't in horror. As much as a viewer as anything else, like as a, it was for my 15-year-old, 16-year-old self, for sure.
Yes. And Maine is so distinctive. I've got in-laws in Maine, so as soon as I saw the trees, I was like, oh, this is Maine. And it's, as I say, very distinctive, and almost sort of becomes a character because it's in the wilderness and everything there. What was your experience like of shooting up there?
Shooting there?
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in Maine, so I know a lot of the locations. That the cabin that we shot in was a cabin that my dad built when I was in junior high, and so it's like an off the grid fishing camp. And so shooting there was it was great because I had access to it, but at the same time, like, there was no internet, there was no electricity, there was no cell phone reception, there was no flushing toilets. Like the that outhouse was our crew outhouse. Like, and on the one hand, it was really challenging, but it was also kind of great because nobody was on their phone when we were working. Like, it was like we were all 100% there to to do the job. And of course, like, Maine is gorgeous. That forest, the river, like, it's incredibly cinematic. And the woods are frightening. I think that that massive expanse of nature, and you sort of realizing that you're such a tiny part of it, can be kind of overwhelming and frightening in a way that worked for the film, I thought.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Give me a bit of an insight into your approach for the look of this film, and I don't know if you maybe want to bring in how your work as a photographer feeds into your work as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for this film, I knew that I'd wanted to shoot a lot in natural light as much as possible, and I knew that you know, the DP that I wanted to work with, he came from a background of shooting documentaries. And so he was incredibly used to being reactive and sort of following where the action was. And so I felt like that was a skill that was super important. Um, and then we shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which was, you know, more than anything, it was about my love of the close-up and knowing these faces going into the film, and knowing that I wanted to fill the entire screen with faces, which you can do in 4:3 in a way that you can't when you're shooting sort of 16:9 or widescreen. You're sort of always left with, you know, a big chunk of the frame that's empty. And I knew, especially for some of the more difficult stuff in the middle of the film, like that I wanted to be really up and with these characters. And, you know, as a photographer, I've spent so many years, you know, framing and lighting, that it kind of comes as second nature to me, in terms of like, the camera needs to be here, and then this light, you know, there's a shorthand and a sort of ease that I approach some of that comes just from, you know, doing it for so long.
And one last question for you,
Yeah.
and a broad one. It's for your favorite piece of LGBTQ plus culture. So it could be photography, or a film, TV series, music, art, a play, or a person who identifies as LGBTQ plus. So just someone or something that's had an impact on you and resonated with you over the years.
I think at the moment, I mean, you know, young me, maybe like the Gordon, you know, the Lord God Won't Mind, and the Gordon Merrick novels. Do you know those novels?
No, I don't.
I can't remember if it's Gordon Merrick or Gordon Merrill. But they had these sort of, you know, these traditional, you know, like the romance novel covers with like the beautiful skin and the tropical locations, but it was like two guys that were holding hands. And there was a whole series of novels that came out in I think it was the late 70s and early 80s, that I remember getting my hands on a couple at an early age and just being blown away that this even existed. I would say those, yeah.
Yes. And were you going to say something that you more current as well?
I mean, well, no, the other thing that was more current was actually not current at all. It was like, I just on eBay recently got like an archive of Honcho magazines from like 1979 to 1982, and like the aesthetic of that also I'm super into and love.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Well, Carter Smith, thanks very much. Congratulations again on Swallowed, and yeah, great to get to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for helping to spread the word.